Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Loki, the latest Disney Plus series on Disney Plus, I guess, for the MCU, and featuring, as one might expect, the character of Loki. So we'll be going over my thoughts on the series. Sorry, I was kind of the background's got a lot of weird stuff in it today. We're putting up shelves today, and I didn't really couldn't figure out a place to put them, so we're just gonna kind of go with what we got. But I figure, well, let's talk a little bit about what the show is, because it is featuring the Loki that everyone kind of assumed was going to be featured in this story, that escaped uh, through a hole in time, basically. Yeah, sure. uh, oh, I lost my thing. There we go. So the Loki from the original Avengers movie in 2012 fell through a hole in time in Avengers Endgame and basically escaped. Because of them intervening with the timeline, they essentially stepped in and, like the Avengers stepped in, and Loki was able to escape with the cosmic cube, one of the Infinity Stones. Zach Tatt was saying Loki was taken in by the Time Police, right? Yeah, so that's kind of the premise of the first episode. K5 says the show was great, and he asks how I'm doing. I'm doing great. It's been a busy but productive day, but I'm feeling good, and I watched this episode this morning, and really enjoyed it overall. We'll talk a little bit about how it falls with the rest of Disney Plus, but basically Loki just sort of teleports away at first, kind of like, okay, I got away. The Avengers just took me down for the first time, but I escaped, and I still have the cosmic cube. And he starts, as he's trying to form his plan, these soldiers show up, and they're the Time Variance Authority. They basically immediately incapacitate Loki and take him to their headquarters, where he's soon processed and put on trial. And basically they explain, well, you're a rogue element in time. What the Avengers did traveling in time, that was all supposed to happen, apparently. So that's why these characters didn't show up until now, which is, very convenient for the story, but the kind of thing I'm willing to let go for the sake of the story, especially because it's quite fun. And so Loki is basically going to be executed. He is like some rogue element of time, and they explain that it used to be people could travel through time and kind of cause, as I interpreted it, basically the chaos of Avengers Endgame, where you're going from one universe to the next, affecting timelines, trying to change things to serve whatever goal you meet, but because these actions just create more timelines, it led to chaos. It's not really anything from the comics, but it feels like just yet another of so many examples at this point of Marvel steadily introducing this concept of the multiverse to the MCU. So that's obviously coming, and I think with each new episode of these Disney Plus shows, it becomes more and more apparent that we're heading in the direction of like the X-Men and potentially those characters probably being established in the MCU through some sort of multiversal style event. What that looks like, what form it takes from here, that is anyone's guess. Zach Taft was saying, so they didn't bust the Avengers for time travel. No, for those of you that haven't seen it, I would recommend it. But from there, Loki basically gets allowed to stay because he's useful to Owen Wilson, who's actually a very fun, not at all annoying presence that I think really adds something to the show so far. His character is rock solid. He basically plays one of, as I interpret it, one of the more senior Time Variance agents, and he's basically tasked with investigating these agents that are being killed in the field. They do actually eventually find a witness at one point during the episode, and the kid just sort of points to this image of the devil. I'll get back to that a little later. But he kind of sets Loki aside and says, like, he starts to go through some of the timeline with Loki. First stuff that Loki already knows, everything that happened to the Avengers, as well as some stuff we didn't know. I really like this joke, and it works so well if you know who D.B. Cooper is, but basically it establishes that Loki was D.B. Cooper and he was on Earth as part of some bet with Thor back in the day, and that led to the circumstances of the D.B. Cooper mystery. For those that don't know, D.B. Cooper was a guy who basically hijacked a plane, took a bunch of stolen money, ordered the plane into flight, took off with a parachute, and was never seen again. And nobody really understood what happened to him, but the idea is that Heimdall pulled him away in the story of D.B. Cooper in the MCU, which it's just a fun little twist on a real-world event that I quite liked. K5 says, do you think Lady Loki will show up? Curious to see a lady run her mouth more than Hiddleston. My expectation for something like that is when Tom Hiddleston is done with the role, maybe we do find out that the Loki that was killed in Avengers Endgame, the one that lived through all of the other MCU movies that Owen Wilson basically starts to take Loki through, mostly Thor the Dark World, where he shows that Loki's actions basically inadvertently led to his mother's death, and Loki starts to really... He doesn't believe it, which I think is in character. He just is like, you're lying, because that's what Loki would do. And I quite like that moment. But I would expect, if I were in charge of the MCU, I would save the Lady Loki card for the day that we're done with Loki as the character and start to introduce the idea of reincarnation to the Asgardians. Perhaps to also go with Chris Hemsworth stepping away from the Thor role one day, or something like that. I also see that kind of being down the road, and that gets into, I would be shocked if this was the end of Tom Hiddleston's time with Loki. I don't know if he said any of that in interviews or anything, but it seems like most of the characters that have been featured in Disney Plus shows are in the service of building up to something, either a film property like direction, which is actually, that's only been the case so far, because WandaVision feels like it's building up to her appearance in the Doctor Strange movie, while Falcon Winter Soldier feels like it's almost a direct prologue to Falcon's Captain America movie that we're going to get, which is cool as hell to me. So I don't know what the direction is for the Loki show. I don't know if it's going to be maybe, oh, we're going to get more seasons of it, or there is a future where Loki maybe is going to star in a film, or star in, like, lead a team of some kind going forward, which I wouldn't be against. But I don't know. And that's an interesting side to this show. And I was thinking about that while watching this episode. Scarlet Witch, if you go back and look at my review of the first episode of that show, I kind of carved out this rough idea of what was going on. And I pointed out Agatha very well could be Agatha Harkness, or someone else I think put it out in chat, and then I started to put together, okay, well, she's probably has something to do with what's going on around Wanda, and it will slowly pull back and reveal the MCU world as we catch up, which is more or less what the show did. But either way, you could kind of see the direction the show was going for, and like Wanda dealing with her grief, all this stuff with Vision, it being unclear like where Vision's character is going from here, but there's a lot of room for him in the future, but also it very deliberately kind of setting up a road and a path for Scarlet Witch going forward, including her kind of firming up her identity as that superhero, which is pretty cool. And then Falcon Winter Soldier, I kind of clocked in right from the start, along with, I think, most critics, where it's like, okay, well, this is clearly kind of setting it up and putting us like in the direction of Sam Wilson taking up the shield, and it kind of being the story of how Wilson becomes Captain America, which is pretty much what it was, and for better or worse. But then we get to Loki, and I have no idea where we're going from here. I honestly can't tell you. Is this about Loki going on another redemptive arc? It seems like the first episode sort of rushed through that because we've already spent like 2 or 3 movies dealing with Loki's character turn, and he got to watch it too, and that seemed to have a tremendous effect on him once he realizes that the Time Variance Authority is real. It's like, and their power is for real. He kind of sees this all as illusion and lies at first, which I think is fair for this character, like I said, because it's what he would do. And so Loki basically manages to escape. Not a huge surprise for a character like this. He gets on the run. He ends up running into Eugene Cordero, who plays this random clerk in the Time Variance Authority that the Cosmic Cube was turned over to. Eugene Cordero is the actor's name, and I love him because he's in a bunch of other stuff, and he's a very, very funny human being. And he was hilarious in this and had me laughing in every scene he was in. Just in his delivery of the lines. It's so excellent. So anyways, Eugene Cordero, who I'm not sure if he played a role somewhere else, but either way, Loki runs up to him and he's like, "Give me the Cosmic Cube back or I will gut you like a fish." And Eugene Cordero goes, "What's a fish?" And Loki's like, "How do you not know what a fish is?" And he's like, "I have lived my entire existence at this desk," because all these Time Variance Authority people appear to have been created for this purpose by these timekeepers that sort of created the Time Variance Authority to keep variants like Loki from existing. And that's why they will erase them, because of the chaos I was talking about earlier that was caused by free-range time travel. So these guys are sort of time agents of some kind, similar to the sort of stuff that was explored in Legends of Tomorrow. But they feel original and different enough from that, and we are sent a lot more into the world of the Timekeepers and the Time Variance Authority than we are in the similar Time Lords of Legends of Tomorrow. And I think that angle is very different. So anyways, Loki's telling Eugene Cordero, "Okay, give me the Cosmic Cube." And he's like, "All right." He pulls open a drawer full of Infinity Stones. And Loki falls apart at this. And I think it's so right. Because it just shows, to me it was like, it just shows how pointless Loki is in the grand scheme of things. And I think he starts to grasp that. He's like, because Eugene's like, "Oh yeah, people come in with those Infinity Stones all the time." Which makes sense, because one of them's even a time stone. So they're using them, they're porting around, and the Time Variance Authority, especially because of the nature of how time travel works in this world, is just picking up these constant copies of Infinity Stones, which don't even work in the Time Variance Authority's realm. Like, Loki's magic doesn't even really work and stuff, so he doesn't really have his full capabilities and has to rely on technology to get around, which is an interesting challenge for him. And that's what I think that's a good point to maybe step aside and just say I love how this episode was not only written but also directed. And I noticed, and it's not a huge deal, and they didn't make a big fanfare of this, which I applaud Marvel of, but Loki's first director of this episode is a woman. And it's not a big deal, but historically directors are 90% male or something like that, as recently as a few years ago. So making these differences is good. But what I love about this is it's a female director for a male-led series and stuff. So it's not like, oh, we have a female character, it has to have a female director, or any of that nonsense. It should be irrelevant almost to what kind. What I care about is what the director can do, and the way the director sort of pins the whole heel turn and Loki's character and really lets it sink in for him, and he just stares for a moment at the Time Variance logo, and he's like, "Is this the most powerful force in the universe?" Because I still think he doesn't fully grasp his place in things, but that moment there, I was thinking about it. Well, how many Lokis have come through and had to surrender their Infinity Stone that are filling that drawer? And Eugene Cordero's like, "Oh yeah, we have so many of those. People are using them as paperweights. That drawer is not even the full contents of them. They're just what's around." And I think he really kind of gets how pointless it would be for him to go back and try and meddle with the time or do something different. And Owen Wilson's kind of asking him so you want to rule Midgard? Then what? And he's like, "Well, then I'll conquer all the 9 realms." And he's like, "Are you going to conquer space too?" And he's like, "Look, I'm just trying to understand you. Do you like to hurt people?" And he shows Loki hurting all these people and stuff from the original Avengers movie and maybe the Thor movie even. And Loki doesn't really answer that. But Loki decides, in light of all of this, in light of the fact that his existence up until now in a lot of ways has been pointless, and his means to conquer has just been a path that 1,000 other Lokis have taken, and they all do this, and Owen Wilson's saying, you all get your mom killed in this quest for power and stuff, basically just exposing her to danger. And so Loki goes back to the room where Owen Wilson's showing him his history, and he watches the rest of the tape. The tape being the events of Avengers Infinity War, where Loki gets killed, but before that, Thor Ragnarok, where he witnesses him and his brother sitting together as their father dies, and like his dad's last words to him. And Loki basically goes through the changes he went through in Thor Ragnarok and Endgame in a moment, which I feel is like very quick and cheap in some ways. I could see some people criticizing it, but like I said, we've been there. We don't need to go through this all again. So us kind of fast forwarding through it worked for me, but I also think it's earned. Like these events would have this effect on this character. Seeing these things would have a similar effect as him living through them, because he learned that it was possible, and that like it was possible for him to find like genuine partnership with his brother and seek forgiveness and move past like his worst things, and even like cause the death of his mother going by his old ways. And I think that really had a change on him, so he starts to potentially reconsider working with him. But I also think he is kind of lying when he's saying like, okay, well, like, why do you need my help? Why am I here? And he says, well, because the person who's killing other time agents is you. And that's really gets to the crux of like the child seeing the devil imagery, because that's like Loki with his horns and helmet. There's another version of Loki out there killing time agents. And maybe it is like K5 was saying, where it's like the Lady Loki or something like that. But I would prefer it to just be another version of Loki now, because like I said, maybe just hold on to Lady Loki for now. So that's about all we know for now, but that's a lot for episode 1, and I honestly think it's the strongest of the Disney Plus shows so far. But WandaVision started out really strong, and then I think over time gradually transformed back into a more traditional MCU property, which isn't terrible, but definitely scales it back a little more towards average. Falcon Winter Soldier didn't really capture me as much, but I did enjoy it on the whole. But Loki just felt so interesting and different and far less predictable, because they're throwing so much new stuff at us. It's also just fun. When they're talking about the time stream stuff and introducing the timekeepers, they have this cute little animation thing, and that gets into what I was saying about this being a very well-directed property too. And so far, in that regard, all the Disney Plus shows really kind of stand out. Even Falcon Winter Soldier, like I said, it just bored me at certain times, but I also found a lot of it entertaining, and definitely like it's closer in quality to Winter Soldier than some of the other lesser MCU movies and stuff. So I don't want to make it too dismissive. I'm just saying, compared to Loki, I'm a lot more excited about Loki. So let me catch up on chat, because that was kind of my initial spiel and some of my more planned contents. I do have some information about timekeepers, but I'll save that for now, and let's just check in with what some people are saying in chat. Where are we here? So Zach Taff says, last time I saw Owen Wilson, he did Lightning in the Cars movies. Well, and I have like stupid memories of him from that like Haunting remake or whatever that was called, and even just the parody of Owen Wilson with the like wow, or movies that I never really took an interest in, like Marley and Me and stuff, where it's more traditional dramas. He's really fun in here though, and I quite enjoyed him on the whole. But it kind of gets into, well, Owen Wilson's always like been a competent actor and stuff, and it really comes down to direction and who's behind the camera. And I don't have her name on hand, but it gets into like who's running the show as well, and who wrote it, and everyone just kind of did a really good job, and everything came together very nicely for this particular show, an episode, I should say, because we're only at one episode in, and these Disney Plus shows can change over time. I was really excited and blown away by the first episode of WandaVision, and I would have probably loved it if it stuck a little more to the formula of being this weird television parody. But I did enjoy it on the whole. I just felt like over time it was like, okay, like this is odd. Or not even odd. It just, once we got into the big fight between Agatha Harkness and Scarlet Witch, it just felt like, okay, well, we're just doing another third act of like 10 other MCU movies, and I felt less excited than I was when I had no idea what was going on in the first episode. So Zach Taft did ask, how does this compare to Falcon and the Winter Soldier? And I did kind of clock that question in, so I was just sort of answering it as I was sort of rounding out my initial review. But in reply, K5 also said, it's only one episode, but I like Loki more. And that's kind of where I'm at too. This opinion can definitely change as Loki rolls out on a whole, but I definitely enjoyed Falcon, Winter Soldier, and WandaVision plenty. So as it stands, Loki's single episode is still makes it my favorite series, but we got a long way to go. So yeah, I don't want to be too down on it, but I am certainly excited about the content overall. Zach Taft's asking how this compares to the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Well, that's interesting because I definitely found the first episode of Loki the strongest of all three series' first episodes, but I found Falcon Winter Soldier was more consistent across its series and definitely had its moments that it kind of was building towards like I thought it would, whereas WandaVision had a really strong first episode, and even then, I still really like this Loki stuff. It really provides a lot of closure and interesting footage from basically every movie Loki's appeared in so far, and really took stock of his character in an interesting way, while also throwing so much cool new content at us. And it was genuinely funny. This is by far the most I've laughed out of any of these MCU episodes so far. And all the actors, like you're seeing here, are really charismatic and fun. So I do quite enjoy them. I would definitely say it is as good as the first episode of Falcon Winter Soldier at the bare minimum, but I found it more interesting. And that's what K5 is saying too. Zach Taft was saying, I mean, Falcon and the Winter Soldier had a good shock moment, like when John shows up with the shield. But, you know, a shock moment isn't really everything. The rest of the episode was a relatively slower burn, kind of in a more somber tone, showing us where Falcon and Winter Soldier's characters were since Endgame. It also was dealing with the more grounded reality of what was going on Earth post-blip, which was also cool, and kind of getting into the psychology of some of that stuff, as well as the geopolitical effects, which was interesting. But Loki has like a whole new realm and faction to explore and all this fantastical content. So it doesn't compare that well, but it almost feels like if you're talking about that shock moment, well, we definitely get it when we kind of see the full extent and scope, scale, and power of this Time Variance Authority, which is pretty cool. So, sorry, I'm just finding my spot in chat. K5 says, what stone did Loki pick up and try and use? As far as I know, all he took was the Tesseract, the Cosmic Cube. He just went back to what he knew, but he realized all of these were Infinity Stones. He could have grabbed any of them. None of them worked. And we don't actually even see him try and use the Cosmic Cube. He just mentions that he tried to use it several times later to Owen Wilson's character, which is fine. So, yeah, Zach Taft was saying in response to, like, we went through Loki's character development once, we don't have to go through it for it in round two, in response to what I was saying. And yeah, I like how we kind of, they didn't just brush it aside, but they rushed through it so that the rest of the series can be about something else, which felt very necessary. And K5 was saying to Zach Taft, you're going to have to watch Loki. I agree. It really just comes down to that. And he says, I will. And then Precious Mashup says, 2 episodes date. I don't know. I have a feeling that's someone in particular, in which case, yes. Oh, when is it coming out? Okay, well, you know, I've been talking a lot about the show in general, so let's give you guys some production details while we're all here. Since I am treating this as like kind of an informational video too, sorry, I misread that. or what the initial comment was. So the show was created by Michael Waldron, but apparently Kate Herron is directing all the episodes, which I'm really excited about. Or maybe they just listed the one who's appeared so far. But I really like the cast as a whole. Gugu Mbatha is an awesome actress. She plays like some sort of higher authority, even over Owen Wilson in the TVA. But she was also in San Junipero, one of the best episodes of Black Mirror to date, as the love interest character. So I was really excited to see her and to see her name in the credits, because I didn't even put that together at first. But I was like, oh, it's that actress I know who I like. And I was like, oh right, it's her from and she's in a bunch of other interesting movies and stuff too. So, but Kate Herron's a great director so far, and she is credited as directing the next episode, which airs June 16th. So it threw me off because they're coming out on Wednesdays instead of Fridays like the past two Disney Plus shows. And someone else asked me about it. I didn't even know the episode had come out until someone mentioned it yesterday. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I gotta watch that and stream. But definitely I will be checking it out and pretty excited about it because I enjoyed the first one so much. Winter Soldier, I kind of felt obligated to watch it a little more for the channel, less so than for my own personal interest after a while. And I probably would have just waited until the series was done to get around to it, which is I almost kind of did, even in light of Comic Island and stuff. I just stopped caring after a while. Karthik R says second episode will be aired on 16 of Juice, most probably, just going by the pattern of it being out yesterday. But it says it on Wikipedia, and it even has sources, so it's got to be true. But I really like the show so far, and I'm looking forward to what happens going forward. I like also how this isn't the first time that the Disney Plus show has had one director for the entire series, and they seem to have more of an effect on how the show looks because of that, which is great. Most other shows will have a different director for each episode, and then they tend to kind of just have more of a template for what the show looks like, what kind of shots they do, and that sort of thing, to the extent where it really doesn't matter who's directing it. But for these Disney Plus shows, it feels more like a movie, where who directs it really matters. And I think that's what the difference between Loki and the previous two shows really comes down to, is you just have... I don't know much about Kate Herron. I've never heard that name before, and that might be on me. I'm not some film expert. I'm going to look her up now. Oh, she's done a bunch of stuff that I've never heard of. But a lot of short films, so it does kind of seem like it comes down to you direct you become an indie director, do a few indie films, and then Marvel throws a big property at you so they can kind of boss you around a bit. However, it does look like she had a creative sway on some things because it's a creative and different show, and the episode felt like a lot of Disney Plus MCU shows so far, where it's a bit of a breath of fresh air post Endgame, where we're really kind of pushing the MCU in a different direction. We're getting different people in the chair who actually seem to be able to kind of do their own thing to a degree. There's always a negotiation, there's always an expectation that certain things are going to happen maybe, but there does seem to be a lot more wiggle room in the process. That being said though, once again, as I reminded everyone kind of for Falcon and Winter Soldier and WandaVision, and it proved pertinent, I'll get into that in a second. It is worth remembering that these shows aren't meant to be setting up future MCU content. They're usually going to be a self-contained story about probably Loki coming to terms with himself, not even knowing all the events of Avengers Infinity War, but living in a post-Endgame world and finding purpose as a character going forward. I would expect the story to be less about what's Loki's role in the next MCU film. That might be established or hinted at near the end of the series, But mostly I think it's going to be focused on Loki's relationship with the TVA, finding his purpose in life, and deciding what he wants to do as a being going forward. And I think what Owen Wilson asked him about what do you want to do, like what do you want as a character in this episode, is going to be the central premise of this show. And I just give people that warning because in the world of the comic book media out there, there's going to be all these headlines being like, is this going to happen? Is Loki going to be involved in this or that? Or is it going to be setting up Doctor Strange? And yes, these things are setting up stuff like Doctor Strange, but it's only in the sense of like mentioning the multiverse in the cartoon that happens during this episode. It's not introducing us to Doctor Strange's villain, at least I don't think. But, you know, we'll see for sure. I was going to mention, though, one difference is Katie Heron did direct for Daybreak, which is like a comic book series based on like a Netflix series based on a comic book. I don't think I actually watched it. I remember seeing the previews for it and stuff, but so she does have that's a more natural progression than some of the other typical things Disney has done in the past for selecting comic book film directors, but more egregiously like studios outside of them have done in an attempt to copy the formula. The biggest example I can think of is the Fan Four Stick movie, where they took Josh Trank, who did a couple of things. He did do Chronicle, but then just kind of forced him into this chair. Well, not even forced him into the chair, forced him into doing what Fox wanted for that Fan Four Stick movie, and then the whole thing just fell apart because the director had no power. So, where are we? Zach Taft says, I wonder what Loki thought of the Avengers fight with Thanos. You know, he didn't see that. His recording goes up to the point of his death, and he actually really doesn't have any idea of what happened to Thanos. But my guess is he assumes Thor and the Avengers probably eventually beat him, which is more or less accurate. Loki even points out he was aware that there was time-traveling Avengers showing up that caused him to go free, and he kind of blames them for him being this time variant. But like I said, according to the Time Variance Authority, the Avengers were supposed to be there and supposed to travel in time and supposed to defeat Thanos. So I don't think Loki thinks much of that. That to him probably is like, well, of course, the force that defeated me would be powerful enough to defeat Thanos, because that's the only thing that could possibly defeat me, Loki, God. I think that answers your question pretty well, though. Precious Mashup says, what do you think? Please rate at Loki out of 10. My thoughts have been shared throughout the stream, and we'll keep going with that, but I'm actually not going to rate this. I don't typically do that outside of stuff like grading the Avengers, and I would need to create a whole grading scheme for something like that, which I'm not going to do arbitrarily. I definitely think it would rank really well among MCU properties. I think if we were to do something like that, it would probably be in a tier ranking system, which might be a fun stream. And if I was to tier it, and I'm starting to pick apart where I would put it, I would say it's certainly like A or S tier. One of the better MCU properties I've seen so far, but also we're one episode in, so I don't mean much anyways. Zach Taft says, so my friend, you looking forward to Black Widow? Yeah, I think it'll be exciting, and it could very well be like the first movie I get to see in theaters post-COVID, because things are so slow here in Ontario. We've had the longest lockdown in all of North America, so I have no idea when I'll be able to sit in a theater again, but the Black Widow movie will be pretty exciting overall. And hey, interestingly enough, it does appear that someone in chat did rank it out of 10, so that will be interesting. I'll read that in a second, but I'm just going to go in order first. So K5 says, unrelated question, are there comic book characters you're bored with hearing about? For me, outside of movies, it's Deadpool and sometimes Iron Man. Well, those are two solid answers. Batman, I think, would be a lot of people's answers. I don't actually begrudge it too much because if there are characters about it like that, I tend to just step away. I would say for me that happens most frequently with the Joker. I just see so much of the Joker that it leaves me all curmudgeonly. And that was kind of the case with the Joker movie. I came into it a little negative because I'm just so sick of that character. He just shows up so often and gets used so much by DC. It feels like a lot. And I am slow to enjoy things with the Joker because of that. Even good things with the Joker, like Arkham Knight and stuff. I was a little disappointed to see him show up after the character died in that video game, in the previous, in Arkham City. But Arkham Knight did win me over, even the stuff with Joker in particular. So that ended up being my favorite part of the game. So I think sometimes it's just because I'm sick of it doesn't actually mean I dislike the character. And when he's used right, he is popular and fun and loved for a reason. I'm wondering if there's any other comic book characters I'm bored with hearing about. Deadpool, it feels like, that's a character that can be in moderation because he's not like front and center in every comic book event. Iron Man's a little harder to escape though, especially in the 21st century. And as I've started to appreciate, most especially in the early 2010s when the Iron Man movie was like Marvel's first big hit, they really shifted gears towards Iron Man for 5 years or so, and that is interesting. Now, sorry. Zach saying it would be nice to see Loki use the Eye of Agamotto. That would be pretty cool. That is just technically the Time Stone. I don't think we'll see much, if any, of Loki using the Infinity Stones, except for maybe a few key moments on Earth here and there. They're mostly useless in his current setting at the TVA, and it's only if he's smart enough to have pocketed one during that escape for use later, which I would have done. Sorry, man, hold on, let me get some water. Getting some vocal fry going on here. But I was thinking about that when Loki had the drawer full of Infinity Stones. Like, Loki's the kind of character who would do this, but even me, in that situation, I 100% would have pocketed one of those at random, just whatever one I can grab. Red, blue, whatever. They're all so powerful and useless. Henry Brown donated $2. Thank you very much, sir. He says Necro God Loki would be great to see eventually. And that would be cool. There's ample setup for that. Not even in just the villain Loki we're introduced to in this episode, but in the future as being like some weird resurrected version of the Loki that was killed in Avengers Endgame was the first thing I thought of. So thank you for that cool idea and thought, and $2, Henry Brown. Always appreciated, sir. So now I'm going to kind of read through Grayified X. Sorry, I just couldn't tell if there was an I there because of the way YouTube displays its chat. But he wrote a little bit of a review, and I'm just gonna go ahead and read through it sometimes. It was okay. The humor fell flat sometimes, and the buck-breaking scene was unnecessary and too sexually explicit and out of place for a Disney Marvel superhero series. This is his opinion. I'll talk about it in a second, but it's interesting. I'm going to kind of talk about it. Not sure if they needed that full frontal nudity with penetration scene either. What? Maybe they could have been mentioned off camera with more family-friendly dialogue. Anyway, the special effects and flashback scenes were done very well, but would not recommend for children under 18 with parental guidance. I was also hoping for more Avengers to appear as well. Maybe we'll get a few cameos later. Come on, Disney, get it together. 7 out of 10. So that's what I was saying to the person who was asking for a rating. There's a rating for you. It's not necessarily one I agree with, but what a 7 out of 10 to him means might not be what, we might actually have the same idea in terms of, what we rate it, which is why I don't love ratings arbitrarily on their own. Now, I must have been looking away for a second or something, because I definitely missed the full frontal nudity if that actually happened. And I'm not even disbelieving. I know exactly where that scene would have happened when they were processing Loki. I actually missed that. and kind of was tuned out a little bit for that processing scene. Because I kind of agree that humor was a little predictable. There was other little jokes along the way that really had me laughing. Stuff where, like, oh man, when Loki's in line and the guy before him loses his ticket and the guy just vaporizes him and Loki's desperately looking around for his pocket for the ticket and he pulls it out showing that he has it. I love that. I thought that was genuinely funny. But he said, if I was saying the humor fell flat sometimes, and I do kind of agree some of the jokes either didn't have me laugh, but it wasn't like, oh, that was like terrible. I just, it came and went. Some of Owen Wilson's banter with, what's her face, the Time Lady, was a little not, like, I didn't find funny either, but I didn't find it cringy either, as much as I hate to use that word. Great fight. Everyone keeps wondering when episode 2 comes out. We did cover that earlier, but June 16th, next Wednesday, is what Wikipedia says, so as far as we know, that's true. And it seems like it's going to be coming out on Wednesdays, but we don't know. And it seems like the dates that appear in these posters here are inconsistent now that I notice. 2 of them say June 9th, which as far as I know was correct, right? Yeah, because that was yesterday. And one of them here says June 11th, so obviously they changed their plan at some point and bumped it up to Wednesdays. Maybe just to see if that affects the timing of how people talk about the show, or maybe they have something else coming out on Friday. We'll find out, I guess. But I don't really know. It's funny that I missed the nudity thing. It felt like a slightly more adult show, but to be honest, most of the Disney Plus ones have. I'm not necessarily against male nudity in and of itself, but he's right that it's a weird place in that, like, Disney Plus, its first year, started out so kidified and so devoid of adult content, and now it feels like we veered completely in the other direction with the Starz Network, because now they have, like, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, all these, like, the Alien movies, all these other Fox properties they've picked up at this point. So I have no idea. But I think the way they've sort of internalized it themselves is every Disney Plus user sets parental things and establishes what to be shown. But I think I'm glad that Gravified could put out that warning in this stream, because I genuinely missed that moment. I must have just been looking away at that point. It was early. For whatever reason, I chose to watch this very early in the morning when relative to when I woke up. I think I was kind of warming up to it at first and must have been grabbing something to eat while I was watching it, but I digress. Josh 1300 WHT says, do you think Thanos knew about the existence of the TVA? I don't think so. Thanos was kind of privy and sus to some of the stuff surrounding the time hijinks the Avengers were up to, but I feel as though that was more a property of them. Well, because they were using the microverse to travel through time. But I was going to say, like with him using the time stone, it's very possible Thanos knew about that, especially through the Infinity Stones that can provide this sort of knowledge and stuff. But my initial instincts were to the contrary. I guess it comes down to, at what point did Thanos know about the TVA? I also think it was irrelevant to him. He knew that, he was so sure about his path, he was like, well, they haven't come to stop me, so obviously this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is my destiny. Josh also says, when did the villain Loki come from? That's a good question. As far as I can tell, and my interpretation of things, is there's plenty of Lokis out there. Because we saw a few in Avengers Endgame. Every time you're going to a different timeline, every time someone time travels, there's a new timeline out there. And it all has to go in a certain direction, which is why a key facet of Endgame was that Captain America had to return all the stones that they had taken from alternate timelines, because if they didn't, they probably would have run afoul of the TVA. And the Ancient One kind of explained that to, I think, Doctor Strange? No, because he wasn't in Endgame, or at least not in that point. I think she explained it to the Hulk then, or someone, whoever. One of the Avengers characters. I'm blanking on who it was now who had that conversation with the Ancient One. But regardless, maybe it was Tony Stark. But it was an interesting. So I think it is Loki's from one of any of those timelines. Not necessarily one affected by Avengers Endgame, but some sort of timeline where he managed to grab the time stone or something and then moved himself in time to escape some event along Loki's history, and that made him a variant. They processed him, and then he also escaped, but maybe more successfully than the Loki we see here, and he started killing time agents and stealing their tech for his own mischief, as they refer to affectionately a couple times in this episode, which I enjoyed too. So, Josh also says, the Infinity Stones in the drawer was such an awesome moment, showing how powerful the TVA are. It's honestly one of my favorite moments in the MCU so far. It was just such an interesting... I think it was just... It showed to me something that I think we kind of already knew at this point. That Loki is a very small player in this larger game of timelines and stuff, and his attempt to seize a single Infinity Stone and conquer Earth kind of feels like small beans now in comparison to everything that's happened and where Loki's been. And it's like, really, Loki, you want to do that still? Like, the Avengers are just going to stop you again, even now, after everything that's happened. So what's his plan? What's he going to do? Nothing's the answer. And I think that scene is when it finally dawns on Loki. It's like, and he doesn't, I think, really fully grasp it at that point, because he still has to see more of his timeline at that point in the episode. But I think he fully understands, like, no, you're not this grand conqueror. You're meant to just die. And, like, the stones and, like, your quest to get them is just, like, as Owen Wilson said, your role in this so far is just in the service of making other people better. That's all your existence seems to be. Is your terrible behavior makes Thor the best person he could be, and the Avengers the best they could be. They literally came together to avenge you, and it's such interesting writing and such a good take on his character. I really liked it. We'll see if the rest of the show can live up to what's been set out so far, but so far I've thoroughly enjoyed what we've gotten. Grayified says, will we see Frost Giant Loki? You know, it's something that I was wondering while, like, during the processing and stuff like that, while we're talking about the nature of Loki, and it's just like, you know, it is funny that Loki's just a misshapen frost giant, basically, and it would be interesting to see something like that. We don't really get a good look at Loki, and it would be cool if it was more of him like a frost giant. It could be Lady Loki. I just feel that should maybe be saved if they want to keep the character around post Tom Hiddleston, and but I'm not necessarily against that idea either. Josh says the Ancient One talked about it with the Hulk. See, that was my first guess after I remembered Doctor Strange was dead at that point in the Endgame, but then I faltered for a minute, and for some reason I had trouble picturing him in that scene, but I kind of see it now. It was good stuff. I like Mark Ruffalo as Hulk. I hope we get more of him. But I don't really know what the plan is with that at the moment. Maybe he'll show up in She-Hulk or something like that. Another thing I do want to talk about is I really like the pace these Disney Plus shows are coming out. We don't have to wait like weeks or months between them. They're at a pretty regular pace and seem on track to be doing so for the rest of the year. And that's pretty fun. Grayified asks if any way Loki will join the Dark Avengers. I think that's perfectly possible. I was saying it very well could be establishing something in a future show or movie, because that's been the case with the past two Disney Plus shows, is they seem to just kind of be building up to some sort of film of some kind, whether that's Doctor Strange, some other property. Is he going to show up in the Eternals? Who knows, but I'm curious just the same. Josh was saying he was great. If we're talking about Tom Hiddleston, I agree. He's also... we talked a lot about Owen Wilson and Mabathra, I think is how you say her last name, and how fun they were, but Loki himself was a really fun actor, and even some of the other TVA agents, like the lady that we can see in the one poster, and this other dude that works with Owen Wilson, who has this fun little bit about speaking French. I found him like a pretty fun actor, although I don't know how much we're going to see about that. Oh, Josh was saying he was great in terms of Ruffalo. Yeah, I think it's a shame that he never really got to carry his own Hulk movies, but I sure would like him to. Maybe we'll just leave it at that for now. But I think we'll call it there. That was a fun 50-minute stream, apparently. It really didn't feel like that to me. Oh, and then Josh is saying he was also impressed with Owen Wilson also. Yeah, I agree. Special thanks again to Henry Brown's donation. He does that all the time, so I really appreciate it. But yeah, I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching, everybody, and y'all have a great evening. Oh, although, okay. You know, I haven't actually ended it yet, and Gravefly did have one final interesting comment there. And maybe it won't be the last comment even. But he was saying Dark Avengers would be cool with Loki, Wanda, and US Agent. You know, I can even throw one extra character in there for you with the new Black Widow, Yelena Bolanov, that we're going to meet in the next Black Widow movie. Fun addition right there. That would be cool as hell. If they can somehow swing having Norman Osborn in that mix, or some variation of that as War Machine, that would be pretty interesting. Yeah, it really does seem like they have all the pieces for a Dark Avengers, though, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island.